My name's Sebastian. I'm the executive director at Trees, Water, and People. Today, we're going to start with just an overview of what we're seeing, hearing, and how things are changing in our world. I'm going to just give a high-level overview, then I'll pass it over to our program directors, James Calabasa of our Indigenous Lands program and Daniela Bueso of our Mesoamerica program, so they can speak more specifically to how all these changes are affecting their programs, their partners, and the work on the ground. The overall theme is that we're looking to 2030, right? We're really focused on the long term. We have a lot of great programs and balls in play, funding and funding partners, and outlooks that really take us beyond everything that's going on in the current administration, all these changes and all these short-term choppy waters. So, by the end of the call, hopefully you'll have an idea of where our focus is, which is on the horizon, and how we're planning on getting there. We're going to take questions via the chat. So if you do have questions that come up throughout the call, just feel free to type them into the chat. We have Hope Radford from TWP. She'll be cataloging those. And the last half hour of the call will be just an open Q&A session, where we'll address those questions and just have a conversation about your concerns and your questions and curiosities about TWP and our work. So the way I've been explaining it is that, Trees, Water, and People is kind of in the eye of the hurricane. We're stable. We're in a good place. We just closed our fiscal year on March 30th, or March 31st, excuse me, started our new fiscal year this week. We had our 8th consecutive year of growth, which is remarkable, really, through COVID, through the Biden administration, and into this year. We've had 8 consecutive years of growth. We've done that through good hiring, good planning, a lot of investment internally, a lot of long-term focused work with our partners, and trust-based funding relationships with our funding partners and foundation partners. But around us, everything is going haywire, right? And so while we're calm and stable and have a reserve and are fiscally healthy and are planning, a lot of organizations around us are seeing some, most, or all of their funding cut, a lot of their ongoing projects and programs halted, and funds frozen. And, it's really creating a lot of instability in our workplace, right? We had funds frozen. We came into the year and had about $1.35 million in federal contracts that we had been awarded in the past year that were suddenly reported as frozen. And that was concerning, right? But only one of those was really active, and that was to fund the Tribal Fire and Forestry Summit in New Mexico, where we gathered over a dozen tribes and practitioners working to reduce risk reduction and climate risk, and also recover from the devastating forest fires of the past decade, where we gathered them together to really talk about planning and strategy in the face of all these federal cuts. We funded the conference, and we were able to unfreeze those funds to make sure that that work doesn't stop, right? Again, like I've said before, the cost of inaction with the work and the conditions that we're seeing is going to be much higher than any investment that we make in the present. So, our funds for now have been reinstated, and the majority of those funds were for work that's going to happen in the next 4 years. So while it changed our outlook for a moment, really, we didn't lose momentum. We didn't skip a beat, because over 95% of our funds come from private sources, including individuals like you all, which we're so grateful for, foundation partners and corporate partners, which, was by design, right? We haven't really pursued government funds very intently, because we've gone down that road in the past, and we know it's feast or famine. And so we've really done a good job of building up grassroots support, and that's really giving us the ballast, the stability to get through these choppy times. So yeah, like I said, we're well positioned to really think strategically in this time, and really think far out into the future. because around us, like I said, there's a lot of change happening. I just came back from 2 weeks in Guatemala and El Salvador, where I had the opportunity to speak to a lot of people on the ground, people related to development work, people affected by the cuts, people who aren't affected by the cuts. But also, we've spoken to folks from over a dozen agencies that are seeing the changes in real time, and it's not a pretty picture. But on the ground, for instance, in Central America, everyone knows about the USAID cuts. USAID no longer exists as it once did. It was absorbed by the State Department, but also the Inter-American Foundation that supported over 400 grantees across Latin America was shuttered overnight. The U.S. Institutes for Peace was shuttered overnight. And beyond just the direct staff employed by those organizations, there's dozens, if not hundreds, of grantees, partner organizations, contractors, consultants, and all of the channel partners and supply chains that feed into keeping those programs going that suddenly had no funds from one day to the next. That means a lot of people were laid off. A lot of people found themselves without work. Some international staff were just left on the street without a ticket home. People that have relocated and relocated their lives and their families to pursue careers. These are professionals, right? And they're all, there's thousands and thousands of them suddenly without work and without a source of income. And that trickles down all the way into the local economy, right? There's local small businesses that support these programs that had contracts that were in mid-production. The way the federal government works often, and our grants operate in the same way, is that they're funded via reimbursement. So you have to spend the money first or get credit to implement the project, and then request reimbursement from your federal grants. So what's happening is a chain of broken commitments that is rippling into the local economy, affecting household level income across many sectors of the economy, both in, well, all over the world, really. Our area of influence is obviously Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and all the way down to Panama, and then to the United States. The funds that we saw cut had nothing to do with the USAID cuts. We actually didn't have any USAID exposure or grants. We had funds from the Department of the Interior, USDA, and U.S. Forest Service, and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So it's really across the board. We know several friends and colleagues who have also lost their livelihoods, and those that didn't lose them are really living in an environment of extreme uncertainty, imposed toxicity in the workplace, and really just an aggressive attack on stable and productive careers. And so, it's happening, right? It's the change is already in play. We know a lot of it's ending up in the courts, but it's an extremely volatile environment to work in. At the same time, climate risk hasn't really changed. We work in climate resilience, and right now the Southwest is seeing one of the worst ramp ups into fire season that we've ever seen. Actually, fire season is year-round in the Southwest now, and New Mexico has been in extreme conditions, fire conditions, since the beginning of the year. They haven't seen any moisture. Colorado's just starting to see moisture. And we're coming off of record fire seasons in 2020 for Colorado and 2022 in New Mexico that we're really working actively to prevent from happening again, and also to recover those watersheds from the damage that occurred during those fires. When a lot of that work is funded and dependent on federal partners and federal funding sources, everything grinds to a halt. But the climate risk continues to exist. And that's the same in Central America. Right now, it's dry season, it's fire season. It was extremely dry when we were down there a couple of weeks ago. But right around the corner is hurricane season. In 2020, Central America saw 2 Category 5 hurricanes hit weeks apart in the same place and displace millions of people and tens of millions of dollars in economic production. So, the climate risk and the climate reality, won't stop for any political cycles. And so this is just a call for the work to continue, right? And why our focus is beyond these 4 years and really thinking long term into 2030 and beyond. So, there's what I think is going to be really difficult to come back from is kind of those broken commitments, the broken trust, the broken networks and connections. And I think that therein lies the opportunity. There are still hundreds of organizations that weren't funded by federal sources, U.S. federal sources, that are grassroots, that are resilient, that are continuing to move forward. But everyone has had some chain in their network broken, severed, right? That they're going to have to rebuild and reconnect. And there are hundreds to thousands of projects and communities that were receiving programs and services from federally exposed organizations that are suddenly in the air. They don't know if the work's going to continue, if the commitments are going to be kept. And that's where TWP is looking, right? We find ourselves in a fortunate position of being very well networked and very well connected in the region after 27 years of doing work in Central America and Mesoamerica and on tribal lands here in the US. And that's giving us an opportunity to listen and hear what's going on at the ground level, interact with our partners. And what's been really inspiring is the conversations that are happening and also how proactive everyone's being in reorganizing and talking about what can continue, where the resources are, and where we can pick up what was essentially dropped overnight. And so there is room for some encouragement. And while there's hundreds, if not thousands, of workers that are bruised and betrayed and were left behind by their organizations and their workplaces and their projects and programs that they had built plans around and made investments around. That's a lot of talent that's really committed to long-term development in their region that we hope to be able to engage and find ways to work together and get people back into the business of building resilient societies, right? Because like I said, hurricane season is right around the corner. There's three main drivers of migration, right? And these are all going to be exacerbated over the coming years. And with the U.S. militarizing the border and all of the migration prevention work going on, which is, it's a reality. There's no pressure release valve, right? Those three kind of main drivers are economic. Like I said, if you can't put food on your table, if your crops get wiped out by a hurricane, if your currency is devalued, or if prices continue to rise and you're in an inflationary environment, economic reasons are going to drive you to look for greener pastures somewhere else. So that's one driver of migration that we know because of all the additional unemployment happening, because of the U.S. federal government cuts, and because these economies are anemic to begin with and are precarious to begin with and are extremely vulnerable to climate, we see that as a rising threat moving forward. A second driver is security, right? People's ability to just live safely, free of extortion, free of gangs and narco trafficking violence, but also free of corruption. And we know that a lot of the work being funded internationally by the U.S. was a lot of watchdog works, a lot of work protecting democracy and democratic institutions. And there's an opportunity now. There's an opening for more authoritarian measures to really take hold and to decrease the security situation and put people in more precarious situations. I include corruption within the insecurity of people's lives in the regions that we work in. And the third driver of migration is environmental, right? A climate risk pushes people out when natural disasters strike and you don't have, anything left to rebuild from. You lose your house, you lose your livelihood. Often the only answer is to move on, right? And to look for greener pastures where you can sustain your family. And often that has involved migration to the U.S. Now, that's not a durable solution, and that's why we work on making conditions better on the ground so people don't have to leave, right? Making sure that there's good paying jobs and opportunities, making sure that people are resilient to climate disaster and can bounce back faster. And the best of circumstances is when you can create jobs that increase climate resilience for local communities, right? And that's kind of the sweet spot that TWP focuses in. So that's going to be an even bigger need moving forward, and somewhere where we hope to fill some of the void left by all the federal cuts. And, you know, like I said, I think that this offers an opportunity for the rise of the decentralized development economy. Not everyone is shedding tears over the USAID cuts. A lot of people are seeing an opportunity for local and decentralized organizations to spring up and to find strength and to find stability, and to really take the lead in creating long-term development and opportunity in their countries. And so, you know, we do see this as an opportunity to support local organizations, to support local networks, and create capacity that's going to stay in the country and won't be as dependent on external aid moving forward. But it's a big gap to fill, and we know that philanthropy can't fill it all. Individual donors can't fill it all, and we have to be very strategic and very efficient in how we use resources. But you know, the long-term takeaway is that there's an opportunity to create local capacity and local resilience, and really strengthen local civil society so that, you know, these shocks don't happen in the future, right? This is just a lot of this is a symptom of overdependence and just getting comfortable. Obviously, you know, good things were happening and good programs were being developed and executed and alleviating a lot of need and suffering. But, you know, I think the opportunity now is to ask how we can do that without the 800-pound gorilla that was USAID or other federal sources. And can we find ways to fund it in more creative ways and leave more capacity and more of that wealth in country, right? And create just reciprocal examples of local development. So, you know, TWP is really well positioned to play a role in this new reality. We've been really building our networks, building our track record and reputation in the region for 27 years. We'll be 27 years old this month. And we're really talking and listening a lot to all the partners and people operating in the region that are reorganizing. Right now, we're presenting at a conference in Guatemala today at this very hour about how philanthropy can help fill some of these gaps, how we need to trust local actors and also intermediaries that support them, how we need to fund networks and build resilience across the region, right? And we think TWP has a role to play in a lot of that story. So we hope that after this call, you feel also compelled to stick with us, track our progress, keep participating in these webinars. We'll try to share what we're learning on the ground, and that you feel compelled to continue supporting TWP's work, both in the US, where we have huge opportunities to really change a lot of the paradigm around fire management and post-fire restoration, especially around tribal lands and in national forests, and then also throughout Mesoamerica, where we're doing some really amazing work across Mexico and into Central America and into the Caribbean as well. One of our greatest assets is our relationships, right? Our relationships with our partners, with the communities that we've served, and also, and that's not possible without our 16 staff, right? We have 16 very talented and dedicated staff, and one of my main goals for the next 5 years is really keeping them healthy, well-positioned, and not suffering from the uncertainty and the volatility that's happening all around us. As long as we can stay in that eye of the hurricane and keep our heads about us and keep a clear view of where the opportunities are and where to invest our time and resources, I think we have the team that can really help get us through and pull us all through this really interesting period in human history. So I have two staff that I'd like to introduce that are going to share a little bit more in more detail about their work. I have James Calabasa from the Indigenous Lands Program. He's the program director, came on as an intern back in 2018, and Daniela Bueso, who also came on as an intern, and myself, who also came on as an intern. We like to grow our talent in-house and internally and organically. But I'd like to pass the mic first to Daniela Bueso to share more about the Mesoamerica program and the ways forward in Mesoamerica.
Thanks so much, Sebastian. And first off, I just want to thank every single one of you for being on this call with us. It means a lot that you can hear our story, but also be here in solidarity with TWP. So thank you. I just want to give you all a very brief introduction, kind of bird's eye view to the Mesoamerica program, or MAP, as we like to call it here in-house. And we're currently working, expanding across borders. We just opened up a program in Mexico last year, working with Veracruz, an indigenous community, on forest conservation projects. That was a small pilot that we started last year. And most recently, we expanded into Oaxaca, working with 2 indigenous communities on the forest protection of their ejidos, or their communal lands, as well as working with women's empowerment, entrepreneurial workshops and skills to allow women to have dignified livelihoods as well. In Guatemala, we continue our amazing partnerships with 2 local organizations, one in the Northeast and one in the Southeast, working with indigenous tribes and communities as well on forest management, women's empowerment, but also that indigenous and food sovereignty that really, like Sebastian says, hits on all of the aspects of survival and providing families a dignified life and a future, right, to stay in their communities in the countries where they live. As well in Honduras, as most of you have heard, we recently opened a new protected area in the outskirts of Tegucigalpa. We're helping support that effort with the local organization COEAS, the Comité Ecológico de la Aldea de Suyapa, and really kind of building that foundation for them to kickstart as co-managers of this protected area, and as well as improving the health and lives of families across Honduras with our Cook Stove program, reducing deforestation, but also improving lives of people building the stoves, but also improving family health, because a lot of these families cook with firewood. So these are, some of the more general objectives of the program. But like Sebastian mentioned earlier, the recent international development sector has been shaken up, as you all know, by this USAID funding removal, but also went down to the local level, affecting local agencies that were managing and running these programs, and really leaving a lot of gaps, challenges, and volatility in this region. And so us as a Mesoamerica program, moving forward, what we want to try to focus on with our partners is to continue increasing their institutional capacities. How do we better prepare our partners to have a really, really strong foundation for that? If these events happen again, they have a diverse staff, they have a diverse funding stream, they have increased local partnerships, they not only depend on TWP or the US, but rather internationally and locally, right? How can they better present themselves and diversify their programs? And this, we want to create a regional influence. We want to take these efforts into across all borders in Mesoamerica. And we've been lucky enough to have grant opportunities like the Climate Land Use Alliance and the Ford Foundation, which are really allowing us to open doors with key partners, key stakeholders in the region that really will promote this type of institutional capacity and strength within our partners and every other organization working in these countries. I also want to, reiterate that partnerships and grant opportunities and funding streams that are flexible and adaptable and focused on the long-term vision of this work is what we're aiming for as a program. We all know that development work, both here in tribal lands and across borders, takes long time, years of impact, years of work. We've been in it for 27 years and we're still learning, we're still adapting to all of these changes. And we want to continue learning, right? And bringing those voices that matter to the audiences like you guys, like our donors, our supporters. And I just want to say to our long-term vision as a team is to, having eyes and ears on the ground. We have 2 amazing co-workers in Guatemala and Honduras. Growing our staff in the region is going to further, improve our work, but also inform us of what's going on, the realities, and who better to do it than the people who live in these countries. So we would like to expand our team, looking forward in the next 4 to 5 years into Mexico, El Salvador, and really create networks and even connect, the IOP program, the Indigenous Lands Program, with the Mesoamerica program. There is a lot of interconnection between the tribes here in the US and the tribes in Mesoamerica. So how can we help bridge these efforts and this knowledge into improving the lives of all of us here on planet Earth? So I just wanted to close out with that and give the opportunity for James to talk about his program. Thank you all for listening, and I'm here if you have any questions. On to you, James.
Thank you, Daniela. Yeah, hello everyone. Great to see you all on this call, and really appreciate you all taking time to join us on this webinar. As Sebastian mentioned, and Daniela, my name is James Calabasa. I am a citizen of Santo Domingo Pueblo, a pueblo in New Mexico. So I'm really fortunate to be able to work with Trees, Water, and People, and also work with my community in a professional role. But I am the director of our Indigenous Lands Program, which is our domestic-based program here in the United States. And we work with several federally recognized tribes across the Southwest, specifically on post-fire recovery, restoration, land management, and coordinating of various networks and working groups across the region. But our work, doesn't come easy. It's, conservation, environment, it's all been affected the last 5 years regarding the increase, number of fires in our region, the shortage of water availability, drought becoming more prominent. Those are all just external environmental factors that are really out of our control that we deal with on a daily basis, and our community partners deal on a daily basis. But we accept that challenge. We as humans, I think the way we learn and we grow is through challenging times. And being a Native American and being born and raised on a reservation, when we first heard about the federal disruption and January 21st coming into play, for me was like, what's changed? What's different? I've lived my entire life within this system, and so have the people in New Mexico. So there was already a lot of insulation and resilience towards fighting back. And that's what's been, grounding our work in a lot of what we're doing across the region. And, we're now, as Daniela mentioned, Sebastian, that we've grown exponentially across over the last few years. And one of the biggest pivotal moments for Trees, Water, and People organizationally was establishing a satellite office in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We're now grounded with our community partners. We're established there. We know day-to-day operations and are part of those conversations regarding tribal needs, priorities, as well as the overall dynamics of happening across a larger scale. And as alluded to, fire, climate, those are all everyday components we're seeing in our daily lives now. But the climate shift, the climate impacts is not only affecting our landscapes, our natural resources, it's equally threatening indigenous heritage and lifeways, which is why it's making our work here and under the Indigenous Lands Program more crucial than ever. So over these next 5 years, we have a lot of work to do, and as mentioned, we're accepting that challenge. I think we're resourced. We got a good vision. We got a great leadership under Sebastian to take us into the remaining decade over into the next. But our Indigenous Lands Program has 3 big priorities that we want to focus on. The first is that the work is going to continue no matter what. We're still going to do, we're still going to restore up to 200 acres of national forest land, ancestral lands of many tribal Pueblo nations in north central New Mexico, because climate doesn't seem politics. Politics will go on. Things in Washington are going to continue to, be discussed, but the work on the ground is going to happen no matter what, because fires cross boundaries, wildlife cross boundaries. We are the only biotic beings on this planet that sees divisions in our heads on our map. So we're trying to take that approach of traditional ecological knowledge that we need to heal ourselves holistically. That's us as people, us as natural resources, and us and being reconnected back to the landscape. So by planting over 40,000 culturally relevant trees on this 200-acre landscape, we're revitalizing connections back to the landscape. We're improving watersheds, recovering forest systems, but also creating jobs at the end of the day. We work closely with several natural resources tribal departments where we hire and contract out their forestry crews. We work with Ancestral Lands Conservation Corps to provide career pathways and direct hands-on job opportunities for young Native American adults to get involved in the work, because young Native American adults today are our future stewards and our warriors. They're going to take on a lot of these responsibilities in the future. So it's important to get them involved now so they're better prepared for tomorrow's management. Part of the projects efforts we're going to be focusing on is this approach to nature-based solution. There's so many different terms and words floating around, but the concept we utilize a lot is the low-tech process-based restoration, which is a fancy name for traditional ecological knowledge. It's a nature-based approach to how we as people can use natural materials, natural a kind of equipment that are locally sourced and available to help reheal our landscapes. This will have ecological, social, and cultural benefits to not just our watersheds, but also to the people, to wildlife, etc. So we're really trying to be a big advocate in increasing the importance of how low-tech process-based restoration can become a key conservational practice moving forward. Our second priority, in a similar vein to our first one, is that we want to move our non-cash cost share agreement we currently have with the Santa Fe National Forest to a master stewardship agreement by the end of the decade. So what does this mean? Why is it important? Well, it's important because with the master stewardship agreement, it gives our tribal partners more autonomy, more equal power, more decision-making power, more ownership of projects versus, the federal agencies and groups saying that, you have to abide and follow these type of standards under our restoration plans. But with the master stewardship agreement, it really opens up an equal playing field of equity, of addressing social and environmental injustices. So that's really our biggest push towards the end of the decade, is to move our current agreement where we're financing 100% all of the project activities in-house or through grants, to donors, etc., to a master stewardship agreement that pushes a little bit more on the federal agencies to invest into this critical work. And then lastly, our third and priority to as we move into the latter half of our decade is increase our visibility in Southwest Colorado. We're currently strong players in the role of restoring, conserving, and stewarding riverscape and watershed systems in the middle Minkes River system. The work is guided by the Traditional Harvest Project that the Mountain Ute community and several other NGO partners put together a few years ago. It really brings forth the need for a cross-collaborative approach to conservation and addressing those social injustices and inequities. And being a player in that, it's really great to know how we can learn from our tribal leaders, our community members, and then also address how we can move forward through an equitable lens. So those are the three big ones that we're pushing for over the next 5 years. But housed under all three of these priorities, Sebastian talked about it earlier, is that we want to sustain our staff. We want to sustain our biggest asset as an organization, is that the expertise, the values, the personal experiences that we all bring to the organization. And then, looking overall at a regional lens, like TWP, we want to strengthen the visibility and the brand of who we are, what we do, being that, we're environmentally centered, but very human focused. We want to make sure that the work we do have direct and indirect benefits back to people. And then lastly, it's a long-term approach. We're not going to be able to heal lands in a 1 to 2 year time frame. It's going to take generations due to just mismanagement, poor management, or no management at this scale. That we're committing ourselves to working with our tribal partners that in long term it's going to create or curate healthier relationships, but also grounds us back to our overall mission as an organization. So I hope that provides some clarity or some kind of instructive idea of how our domestic-based program is moving forward over the next 5 years and into the next decade. So thank you all so much, and be happy to also take any questions from you all.
Thanks, James and Danny. Yeah, like James and Danny said, you know, a lot of this process and a lot of our work is based on listening and kind of keeping those relationships healthy, following through on our commitments. And that's why James said, you know, the work is going to continue. We can't stop and react and pivot every time that a policy change comes down the pike. We really try to set long-term visions and goals with our partners and move towards those as resources allow, right? Right now we're raising, you know, we have a 1.2 million in reimbursable grants that we have to raise money for to get the work started. So we're raising $300,000 to $400,000 this year just to start getting some of these conservation corps crews and natural resource crews that are tribal partners to work, conducting restoration and getting the watersheds functioning in the Santa Fe National Forest back to their original state. We keep our eyes on the horizon. Like I said, we're thinking long term. We're thinking already at 2030, where do we want to be? James spoke about 200 acres. That's the first step in a much larger, longer term process. We're thinking generationally, not just in these short term political cycles. We like blurring borders, right? A lot of the challenges being faced by our partners in New Mexico are common to the challenges being faced by partners in the arid corridor of Mexico and Central America. And so having those groups and grassroots organizations and tribes interact unlocks possibilities that aren't that don't come to the surface, that don't surface when there's too many intermediaries in between, like a game of telephone. And so we're very active in getting our partners together to discuss strategy, to discuss challenges, to share resources and ideas. We really think that grassroots to grassroots, local level exchange is a great way that hasn't been used enough in development to solve problems and to really plan long term, and also to let people know that they're not alone in these struggles, that they're not isolated, that other people are working on these challenges and these problems and finding ways through, creative ways through, and creative approaches to create resilience. And then the last word is about trust-based philanthropy. You know, that's been so instrumental in allowing us to think long-term. That's the notion that we want to look to communities to lead these processes, to drive the idea generation and not put arbitrary structures around their development and their approaches. You know, historically, grants from foundations are 1 year, right? With quarterly reports or things like that. It's a very Western approach to solving problems. They're typically based on numbers of things that we can do per dollar in a certain amount of time. To think long term, our funders also have to join us on that long-term timeline and really fund in a way that allows us flexibility. Just like during COVID, where it was very difficult to plan, we didn't know what was coming around the next corner. This is another type of viral situation where we have to really think beyond these short-term cycles and ups and downs, and really try to smooth that curve by having flexible funding and being able to respond to the needs at the moment, which are going to shift more than we care to think about in the next 4 years. It's going to be very volatile, and trust-based funders, which are providing over $500,000 in capital to us every year, really give us that stability to really respond to changes and to keep our long-term goals in focus. And again, like I said, our staff is really the key to all of this happening. And so keeping our staff healthy, resourced, hydrated, rested, and really thinking of this as a marathon, not a series of sprints, is going to be very important. If you haven't seen our film, In the Right Hands, it's a film that describes all of this. It's on our website at twp.org/trust. And that's a great kind of explanation and overview of our worldview and our approach to these generational and intergenerational challenges. So again, I think we have really the ingredients to play a prominent role in what's to come. With the program that James described, where we have a 5-year agreement with the Santa Fe National Forest and with 3 tribes. Something that I learned a couple of weeks ago is that U.S. national forests around the country share 3,000 miles with tribal nations. as borders, right? And so who's the most obvious partner to provide restoration assistance and capacity, additional capacity to suddenly contracting federal workforces? Tribes, right? They're there, they're place-based, they're not going anywhere, and they want to be there for many generations to come. And so we're really kind of setting a model in the Southwest of how tribes can really be, first tier partners to restoration and also disaster mitigation on national forests. Our work in Honduras, like Danny said, we helped establish Honduras's newest protected area. We have a wildlife refuge that's community managed right on the edge of the capital city. And we need to essentially stand up a national park with rangers, with services, interpretive trails, and really build a staff of place-based people that aren't going anywhere, that need to find a way to build their livelihoods around protecting their natural resources and their water sources. That's a big effort. We expect it to cost over $1 million between now and 2030. The same with the Santa Fe National Forest work. And then with the Ford Foundation and the Climate and Land Use Alliance, that's really giving us an opportunity to map who's doing the grassroots work throughout Mesoamerica and even into the US and the Caribbean, and trying to connect those nodes and examples so that we can all learn from each other about how to create more resilient, these decentralized responses to the state of affairs and to climate risk, right, and to economic risk. And so it's really giving us an opportunity to think from a macro level and connect a lot of dots, nodes, networks, and organizations that are doing great work on the ground and supporting their local communities in ways that doesn't harm the local environment, doesn't exploit workers, and doesn't offshore profits or revenues, right, and keeps that wealth and that capacity local. So those are some examples, and we hope you feel compelled to stick with TWP. Follow us online at twp.org and through our social media channels. And now I'd just like to open it up for questions. I see some coming through on the chat, and I hope is going to help us get through the questions. We're going to keep everyone on mute and just try to address what comes up. So please use the chat space on the right of your screen to voice any questions that you might have.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. I'm Hope Radford. I'm the Program Communications Coordinator at TWP. And as Sebastian mentioned, I'm just going to help channel some of your questions to our team. So please feel free to keep adding questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can in the next 15 minutes or so. So we'll just start with our first question in the chat. Maybe James or Sebastian, if you can just give us a brief update on our relationship with our partner Red Cloud Renewables.
Yeah, happy to, and thanks for that question. So Red Cloud Renewables has been a long time dear friend of Trees, Water, and People. I actually started my internship with going out to Pine Ridge the first time and meeting Sebastian there. But Red Cloud Renewable right now is doing amazing work. I'm glad that they are also connecting with some individuals on this on this webinar, because they're the model of what they're doing through solar-based education or green technology, especially in the heart of native country, is critical. Their model to really start engaging and building out a workforce designated for solar energy and renewable energy that can really drive the workforce forward is amazing. We're currently working with them at a much smaller capacity, more through the idea of agroforestry, tree planting based concept, where annually for the last 10 years now, this coming spring will be 10 years. We've been working with them to plant. The numbers fluctuate year by year, but like, for instance, this year we are delivering 6,000 fruit trees to Pine Ridge Red Cloud Renewables greenhouse, where then local volunteers and community members will plant those seedlings around people's homes to create benefits for the ecology, but also connecting them back to traditional food systems. But we're also using that opportunity to contract out like X amount of tree planters. So there's a seasonal economic opportunity there. But that's really where our current partnership with Red Cloud Renewable is. I know they have a lot on their plate with the solar education and training program, but we're checking in with them very occasionally. Henry is a great friend of mine, great mentor. So that's to the extent of our current partnership.
Thank you, James. I see your question, Miriam. I'll make sure to get to that. I do want to bring a question from Tom that we'd gotten over email. For Sebastian, if you could give a short update on the methodology we use and broadly how we're calculating carbon sequestration within our tree planting efforts or STOKE program generally.
Yeah, so a lot of the work that TWP does reduces or sequesters carbon emissions, CO2 emissions. Kind of the most prominent in that is our cook stove program, where we install cook stoves, firewood cook stoves in people's homes in Central America to reduce both smoke inside the home, but also reduce firewood consumption and dependence on forest resources. About 2/3 of Honduras's population, give or take, is still cooking with firewood, and with all these economic changes and contractions, and also the return of deportees and the growing of families, the elimination of the pressure release valve through migration. We think that firewood is going to continue to be a main energy source for Honduran families, and so we calculate. We work with businesses to fund the reduction of emissions reductions by reducing firewood use in the household. So, broadly, if you reduce your firewood consumption by half, we can take that wood that wasn't burned and estimate an amount of CO2 emissions that were not emitted into the atmosphere, producing essentially a carbon credit or offset, right? And we work with businesses, like I said, to offset their carbon footprints, or households here in the US to offset their carbon footprint from travel, from electricity, et cetera, and other energy sources. By funding stoves, right? So you're not only reducing your CO2 or offsetting your CO2 emissions by funding a fuel efficient stove, but you're also improving quality of life at the household level. Giving people a cleaner cooking experience, a safer cooking experience, with a technology that's very well adopted and adapted to local customs. So that's one way. The other part of our work that reduces CO2 emissions is through sequestration when we plant trees. We stopped calculating and offering carbon offsets through our reforestation work because of the volatility we're seeing in this climate regime. It's very, very difficult when you have one year that's extreme or extraordinary drought, and the next year that a hurricane comes in and washes out everything that you've planted. And so keeping up with tree survival rates and growth rates, especially as we got bigger, was taking too much focus away from the bigger picture work that we're doing in restoring and protecting forests, training communities and protected area management, and all of the other great programs that we're doing, creating networks around the regions that we work. And so while we're still planting tens of thousands of trees per year through our partners and in our projects, we stopped offering sequestration services through the tree planting because it requires a lot of follow-up that we decided to invest elsewhere. With every cook stove that we build, we have a GPS point that marks where the home is that received the stove. We know how long they last. We've researched and studied the cook stoves exhaustively over the past 25 years, and we know how they work in the household and how much firewood they save. It's a much easier calculation for us to do and extrapolate with the 2,000 to 3,000 stoves that we install in Honduras per year. And so we offer carbon offset services through our cook stoves only at this point. I hope that answers the question.
Great. Thanks, Seb. Let's go briefly to Miriam's question. She asked, are we hiring research scientists, or more generally, kind of what type of expertise as an organization will we be looking for over the next couple of years? So I'll pass that to you, Seb, and then I want to get back into Mesoamerica a little bit. So after that, Danny, let's go to Jerry's question. Is U.S. immigration policy changes, is that affecting our ability to establish partnerships in Mesoamerica? So we'll start with you, Seb.
Great, great. Research scientists, you know, where the opportunity fits, right? We've had research scientists on our team. We have some on our board. They provide very punctual and services and expertise when we're looking at a very, very specific subset of a challenge and a problem, especially around tree planting, survival rates, and you know how to stretch restoration dollars so that they have their maximum effect. We don't have research scientists full-time on staff because a lot of our work is relational and really depends on the local partners' need, right? We really let our partners lead in our work and really speak to community priorities where sometimes research scientists and approach are very beneficial, but oftentimes not as well. One way that we are using them is in hydrology and place-based engineering. In the Southwest in New Mexico, we work with a Native woman owned and led hydrological engineering firm that is from the pueblos that we're operating in, and they're providing a lot of that scientific and research background and capability on the project because we're working in a sensitive area on tribal lands and across the fence on federal lands, and we need research scientists that are very place-based and focused. But yeah, just I guess the high-level answer is sometimes to medium.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jerry, for your question. It's also great to see you on this call. In terms of the immigration policy affecting our local partnerships, I would say that internally for TWP, not so much. Our partnerships are very personal. TWP works hand in hand with our local partners, and then our local partners pass that trust and reciprocity into the communities that we work. So as of now, we have those really strong ties and strong relationships with each of our partners. I would say, to add on to that, I think a biggest concern for the program, but also for the region, is this migration, right? The migration that's going back into these countries, people that are returning. Our concern is what is going to be their livelihood? What is the impact going to be in the region? How is that going to affect our partners or the programs? And also, too, if you think of, I saw a statistic yesterday of the amount of money that is being sent from migrants here in the US, sending out money now just in case they get deported. So all the money that comes from the US, people that live here in the US sending money back to their families in the region, what is that going to look like in the next 4 years? So when you really think about the amount of deportations and the effect it's going to have on the region, that's where our concern comes in. It's going to create ripple effects, and a lot of the funding is going to be tailored to managing a lot of that influx of people returning to those countries. And so, great question. And migration is always a top priority in our program, is keeping people where they are, providing them with jobs, so that they don't have to migrate into the US or elsewhere. But yeah, thanks, Jerry, for that question.
Great, thanks, Danny. We're in the last 5 minutes, so I think we will take Tony's question as the last question for now. Obviously, reach out to us if you have other questions, if you want to stay in touch with us. That's really important to us, so please reach out. James, I will pass Tony's question to you and then have Sebastian close us out. What next steps for TWP emerged from the New Mexico Forestry and Fire Summit?
Cool. Yeah, thanks so much, Tony, for that question. Great to see you. Well, a lot of things definitely emerged from that, but I think the top 2 priorities from the conversations I've had, or being in that room, was number 1, the funding. Everyone addressed the funding challenges when it comes to operating under a tribal department or nation, because they're super dependent on Bureau of Indian Affairs or other federal grant sources, which are reimbursable processes. So what their challenge was that they needed seed funding, they needed capital to start the project going, and from there, hopefully start building out ways to get reimbursement slips out to the federal agency so they can get the project sustained, which for us activated our kind of network to, or activated us to go into our bag of network to reach out to groups that are heavily invested in conservation finance. I think conservation finance is a great place where groups that offer low to no interest percent loans can really support tribes in this type of work, where they can provide that seed in a loan or through a grant making process to get the tribes going on the project. Because that's been the number one challenge or obstacle they've been facing. I would say about 99.9% of that room addressed that fact. The second one is that one of the activities we did of the summit was go and do like a World Cafe system workshop. And now what we're doing is gathering and synthesizing all of that information that will be useful for us and our other partners to put together a 5-year strategic plan that's tribally focused, tribally centered. It's like the state of New Mexico Forestry Division has like a tribal action plan that they release every 5 years or every 10 years. Why can't the tribes have one that works in alignment or parallel with that? Because for the most part, when these federal or state forestry divisions or agencies release their plan, it's very limited to what tribal priorities and needs are, and they're never aligned. So the goal is that we're now going to utilize that information and curate a tribal centered focused action plan related to restoration, conservation, and stewardship of New Mexico's and the greater Southwest critical natural resources. So a lot of more social science kind of focus, but I think it's going to lead to great outcomes in the future.
Great, y'all. Well, just to close it out, I want to thank everybody who took the time to be with us this morning. Stay close. Check out our website at twp.org. Feel free to email us with any follow-on questions that we didn't get to, or if you'd like to support our work in outsized ways, either through your expertise or connect us to other people in your network that might be interested in what we do. It's really going to take these decentralized approaches and this interconnectivity of communities to respond over the next 4 years, as a lot of the support we've seen in the past kind of evaporates, right, and decentralizes. And TWP is ready for that challenge. We're not slowing down. On the contrary, we're moving forward and really thinking 5 years out about what we can do together. And we hope that you all are there with us for the journey. So thanks for taking the time, everybody. We hope to continue hearing from you, and we'll keep you posted when we host another one of these fireside chats. Have a great day.